The woman's fingers tightened around her phone as she spoke urgently to the 911 operator. "I'm telling you, this black kid is causing trouble." Her voice was rising with every word, conviction credible in her tone. The teenager in question stood a few feet away, oblivious to the brewing storm. A black SUV screeched to a halt, drawing all eyes. Out stepped the city's mayor, her face masked with controlled fury. The accuser's mouth fell open in shock as recognition dawned. The mayor's voice cut through tension that was quiet, steely. "That troubleshooter you're reporting is my son." In that instant, the woman's surety crumbled. She had committed a terrible mistake, one that would have far-reaching consequences beyond that street corner. As we reflect on this true story, subscribe, and don't forget to turn on the notification for more daily stories that need to be heard. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Would love to hear from you. Jeremiah leaned against an oak tree, enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun in Oakwood Park. He breathed in deeply, savoring the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers. His mom had promised to pick him up soon, and he was content to wait, lost in his thoughts. A prickling sensation at the back of his neck pulled Jeremiah from his reverie. He opened his eyes, scanning the park until his gaze landed on a middle-aged white woman seated on a nearby bench. Sarah, as he would later learn, stared at him with naked suspicion, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her eyes narrowing, Sarah rose from the bench. Her movements stiff and purposeful, she approached Jeremiah, her face a mask of determination. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. "This is a family park, not a place for troublemakers. Leave now, or I'm calling the police." The implication in her words stung Jeremiah. He felt a mix of confusion and anger rising within him. "Ma'am, not causing any trouble," he insisted, struggling to keep his voice calm. "I'm just waiting for my mom. I have every right to be here." Sarah's face flushed with anger. She reached into her purse, pulling out her phone with trembling fingers. Jeremiah's eyes widened in disbelief. He stood up slowly, holding his hands out in a pleading gesture. "Please, there's no need for that," he pleaded, fear creeping into his voice. "I'm telling you the truth. My mom will be here any minute." But Sarah had made up her mind. With a look of grim satisfaction, she dialed 911, her eyes never leaving Jeremiah's face. "Hello, yes, I need to report a suspicious teenager in Oakwood Park," she said into the phone, her voice carrying clearly in the quiet afternoon air. Jeremiah stood rooted to the spot, a cold wave of dread washing over him as Sarah continued to speak to the dispatcher, painting him as a threat. A deep feeling of injustice focused in his chest. He was being criminalized simply for existing in public, his presence declared to be suspicious only because of the color of his skin. It hit hard. In a matter of minutes, police would arrive, and Jeremiah knew all too well exactly how perilous those confrontations could prove for young, black men like himself. He wished his mother would come soon, even while he was getting ready for what might come. With the squealing of tires pierced the air, two police cruisers rolled to a stop, their lights painting the park in alternating flashes of red and blue. Jeremiah's heart pounded, a chill running down his spine as he watched the officer approach. Had seen far too many videos of similar incidents gone wrong, and now here he was at the center of one. The officers walked toward them with measured steps, their eyes scanning the scene. Jeremiah stood perfectly still, hands visible at his sides, remembering his mother's lessons on police interactions. "What's the problem here?" the taller officer asked, his gaze darting between Jeremiah and Sarah. Sarah stepped forward, her words tumbling out. "This young man has been loitering for hours. He refused to leave when I asked. I'm concerned about the family's safety." Jeremiah felt a surge of frustration at how Sarah had distorted everything. Opening his mouth to speak, he was cut off by the second officer. "We'll get to you in a moment, son," he said, the tone of his voice making it clear that Jeremiah's side was secondary. The officers questioned Sarah, nodding as she embellished her account. With each passing moment, Jeremiah could feel the situation slipping away from him. When they finally turned to him, their expressions were guarded. "All right, young man," the first officer said. "Explain yourself. What are you doing here?" Jeremiah took a deep breath. "I was just waiting for my mom to pick me up," he explained, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I come here often. I wasn't bothering anyone." The officers exchanged a glance. "Do you have any ID?" the Second officer asked, his hand resting on his belt. No. Sir, Jeremiah replied, aware of how this would sound. I'm only 14. I don't have a driver's license. As the questioning continued, Jeremiah struggled to articulate his side, the officer's skeptical tone and rapid-fire questions leaving him feeling overwhelmed. He sensed the situation escalating, the officer's posture more rigid. A small crowd had gathered, several onlookers recording with their PH. Jeremiah's anxiety grew, knowing this humiliating moment could end up on social media. Just as the situation seemed poised to worsen, the low rumble of an approaching vehicle, a black SUV, caught everyone's attention as it pulled up to the entrance of the park. The officer's demeanor changed in a second as the driver's door opened. Her eyes went wide with recognition, and Jeremiah felt relief. He knew his mother had arrived. Mayor Angela Thompson commanded immediate attention. Jeremiah watched the officer straighten, Sarah's mouth falling open in shock as realization dawned on her face. The tension in the air crackled with everyone's realization that this confrontation was about to take an unexpected turn. Mayor Angela Thompson emerged from the SUV, her presence immediately commanding attention. The park fell silent as she approached the gathering, her eyes fixed on her son. Jeremiah's shoulders sagged with relief, but the tension in his mother's jaw told him this was far from over. What's going on here? Mayor Thompson's voice cut through the silence, each word crisp and measured. The officers snapped to attention, their earlier confidence evaporating. Sarah's accusatory demeanor crumbled under the mayor's steely gaze. Mayor Thompson surveyed the scene, taking in the police cruisers, the crowd, and her son's rigid posture. ID, like an explanation. Why are my officers questioning my son in a public park? The taller officer cleared his throat, his authority replaced with hesitation. Ma'am, we received a call about a suspicious individual. Suspicious? Mayor Thompson interrupted, her eyebrow arching. What made my son suspicious? Sarah stepped forward, her voice trembling. He was just hanging around for hours. I thought you thought. What exactly? Mayor Thompson's voice was quiet but sharp. That a black teenager in a public park must be up to no good. Sarah's face flushed, her certainty dissolving. The mayor turned back to the officers, her expression a mixture of disappointment and determination. Gentlemen, this situation highlights a critical issue. Did you consider the possibility of bias in the call? Did you approach my son with the same presumption of innocence you'd give any other citizen? The silence that followed was deafening. Mayor Thompson placed a protective hand on Jeremiah's shoulder, her voice softening. Are you all right, sweetheart? Jeremiah nodded, the knot in his chest finally loosening. I'm okay, Mom, he said, his voice steady despite the residual fear. Mayor Thompson turned to the group, her expression resolute. This incident underlines the necessity for extensive anti-bias training. In our police and community, no child shall be criminalized for existing in open spaces. She fixed Sarah with a stern look. I hope this serves as an eye-opener. Your unfounded suspicions could have amounted to serious. This is a result of consequences, and we all must look into our biases to make a place for everyone to feel safe and included. As the mayor's words set in, the atmosphere in the park changed. The visibly chastened officers retreated back from Jeremiah as Sarah mumbled an apology, unable to meet anybody's eyes. Mayor Thompson turned to the crowd. Let this be a lesson that we must do better, and it starts with each one of us facing our own biases and standing up against injustice. With that, she gently guided Jeremiah towards their SUV, leaving behind a park full of people with much to think about. As they walked away, Jeremiah felt a mix of relief and pride. His mother's intervention had not only saved him, but may have instigated the change their community needed. The incident in the park had finally reached its end, but its repercussions echoed through the community. Mayor Angela Thompson knew this day might further polarize the community or make a difference in the quest for meaningful change. With Jeremiah beside her, she stepped forward to address the growing crowd. What we've seen today, she began, her racial bias is a symptom of a deep-seated problem in society, and it carries over into voice carrying across the park. The crowd was silent, soaking it in. We allow baseless fears too often to dictate our actions and get horrific results for people who have done no wrong. Jeremiah, still shaken, found his voice. I just sat here and enjoyed the day, he said, his voice strengthening within minutes. I went from feeling safe to feeling like a criminal. It's not right. Something in the rawness of Jeremiah's words hit home with many in the crowd. A murmur of assent ran through the assembled onlookers. punctuated by nods of comprehension. The woman who had called the police, Sarah, stepped forward. Her face was bright red with embarrassment as she said, "I didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to keep the park safe." Mayor Thompson's eyes narrowed. "The point is, ma'am, that it shouldn't matter whose son he is. Every human being has a right to exist in public spaces without being criminalized." She turned back to the crowd. "This incident has highlighted a need that we need to do more about. Today, I'm announcing the implementation of comprehensive anti-bias training for our police force and city employees." The announcement elicited mixed reactions. Some nodded approvingly, while others exchanged skeptical glances. A man near the front called out, "How will this training actually change things?" Mayor Thompson acknowledged the question. Anti-bias training isn't a magic solution, but it's a crucial first step in raising awareness and providing our public servants with tools to recognize and counteract their own biases. This incident will serve as a real-world example of how quickly assumptions can escalate into dangerous situations. As the crowd continued to debate, Mayor Thompson turned to Jeremiah in a quiet moment. She pulled him into a gentle hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "You handled this with more grace than anyone should have." Jeremiah leaned into his mother's embrace, a mix of exhaustion and relief washing over him. "Do you think things can change?" he asked softly. Mayor Thompson met her son's eyes. "Change is never easy," she said firmly, "but moments like these can be the spark that ignites real progress. We just have to be brave enough to keep the conversation going." They walked towards the SUV and left the park buzzing with intense discussions. As night fell, the day's events had struck a chord. The incident had made the community confront head-on the reality of racial profiling, and the conservative that followed would echo through City Hall, police precincts, and dinner tables across the city for weeks to come. The sun went below the horizon, and long shadows stretched across Oakwood Park. The aftermath of that afternoon still reverberated. Mayor Thompson's words still echoed in the minds of those who had watched the confrontation peel back the scabs and reveal the raw nerves of racial tension still throbbing below the veneer of their community. In the days that followed, the fires of discussion began across the city as citizens wrestled with the uncomfortable realities about their own prejudices, re-evaluating interactions once passed off as harmless. The local newspaper explored why racial profiling occurs, while community leaders organized town halls to confront the issue head-on. Jeremiah was still processing the weight of his experience, but he did have an unlikely ally in his school's debate club. As he told his story, his classmates listened with wide eyes as they realized the gravity of what he went through. It was a stark reminder that the fight against prejudice wasn't over quite yet, even in their ostensibly progressive town. Mayor Thompson forged ahead with plans for wholesale anti-bias training. Resistive pressure mounted, but he resisted. Firm in her conviction, "We cannot afford to be complacent," she iterated in interviews and council meetings. "Every unjust interaction chips away at the foundation of trust our community has built upon." As weeks passed, small changes began to take root. Police engaging in more community outreach programs, fostering dialogue and understanding. Local businesses proudly displaying their signs of inclusivity, and a new mural bloomed in Oakwood Park, celebrating the diversity of the city. Words from civil rights leader Kean Harold rang deep. "Thousands of black men are behind bars, falsely accused. That's why incidents like this need to be discussed." The incident in Oakwood Park had been a wake-up call, challenging us to examine our own prejudices and to work actively at building a more just society. The road ahead would not be an easy one, but it is one that necessarily needed to be taken because the world we live in has been shaped by our actions when facing prejudice, where silence is no longer a luxury we can afford. Join our community of people who believe in justice, empathy, and powerful storytelling by subscribing. You're not just by watching, you're a part of a movement that believes real stories and real change matter. Add us to your daily ritual and be part of every story that counts. Subscribe and join us every day for stories that inspire and uplift.